The course that would lead to the revival of the old Starlin days actually started almost immediately after it had ended, in the pages of the Avengers. There began a storyline involving the original Guardians of the Galaxy, not the ones from the movies, unless you want to count Yondu, but let's not go down that rabbit hole. The storyline was called the Korvac Saga, involving a character surprisingly created by Jim Starlin and Steve Gerber, but just a throwaway character. As Gerber later said, if he'd known the character would come back, they would have come up with a name that didn't sound like a brand of vacuum cleaner. In the distant future, when the Badoon dominate humanity, this poor computer technician got tired on account of being a slave, so they fused him with technology to make him a living computer. That'll teach him. He fought Thor and the original Guardians of the Galaxy in the 31st century, and later found Galactus technology, and was able to interface his cyborg body with it, and through that gained almost godlike powers. He remade himself into a full human body, came back to the 20th century, and began work on his controversial plans for universal conquest. We're not going to get into the details of that. What makes all this relevant for our purposes is that it knocks over the very first domino in our tale. While Korvac is settling in with his lady friend Karina, Avengers have been disappearing one by one. Surprisingly, Korvac has nothing to actually do with that. He mostly just hangs out in his house planning to take over the universe. So the Avengers just keep disappearing with no explanation over several issues. During that time, they're dealing with other threats like, say, Ultron, and had Henry Peter Gyrich getting his panties in a twist over little things. It winds up leading to the Avengers losing all their government support and having to, I kid you not, travel to confront the cosmic-level threat to the universe that is Korvac by taking the bus. By the time there were only 4 Avengers left, they used the Guardians' technology to track down where they'd been going, a ship belonging to none other than the Collector. Now, the Collector was actually the first of the Elders that we'd encountered, way back in 1966. And by 1978, he'd only appeared about a half a dozen times, and 2 of those were in a 2-part story in The Incredible Hulk. Elders are some of the oldest beings in the universe, the last of their race, and endure the billions of years of their existence by fixating upon something. In his case, collecting things. But the Collector says after he is defeated by Hawkeye in issue 174, there's a reason for his mania about collecting. It's that he has the ability to see things in the future, and in his case, he saw that there was a great threat to the entire universe coming. Believing that he wouldn't have the power to stand up to that evil, he chose to create a sort of Noah's Ark to protect against that threat. And that threat, if you're curious, was, of course, Thanos. No, really, it's actually Thanos. Well, when Thanos seemed to be well and truly dead this time, the Collector moved on to the threat of Korvac next, and even sent his daughter to try to interfere. She's Karina. Yes, I said last of the race, but I'm guessing over a few billion years you might get a little frisky from time to time. Instead of thwarting Korvac, the bad guy kills the Collector instead. After his incredibly long life, he was dead just like that. For those who want closure, spoiler warning, the Avengers beat Korvac. Again, having shown up in a bus. So it is a good thing that the Collector was wrong and they faced Korvac and not Thanos, because of course, there was no way that their bus could have caught up with Thanos in his helicopter. Now, it was intended that this point with the Collector would be picked up on relatively soon, but something happened in order to delay the event. And that thing, I shouldn't have to tell you, was of course the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. The idea had been that alongside the Olympic Games would be a comic book event that would likewise feature a competitive game between internationally selected superpowered beings. Not a straightforward set of Olympic challenges, obviously. That would be silly considering these are people with fantastical powers that render such competitions moot. But it would be a challenge nevertheless. The problem, though, was that the 1980 Summer Olympics were being held in Moscow, and in 1979 the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, causing Jimmy Carter to threaten a boycott of the Games if they did not withdraw. In the end, numerous countries, including China, boycotted the games that year. So it seemed like bad timing to release their tie-in to an event that was being booed all across the country. So the event finally happened in 1982, Marvel's Superhero Contest of Champions, the first Marvel limited series, and promising that there were many more to come. In this issue, the Grandmaster and a hooded figure agree to a game of life and death, and have chosen Earth as the place where it will be played. The first half of the book proceeds to show heroes from the Avengers all the way down to Heroes for Hire and everyone in between just vanishing, until we have this grand double-page spread of all of them in a single room. Then the rest of the book shows those with some commonalities conversing, like Colossus and one of the Soviet superheroes, and Vision and Machine Man. But Moondragon and Professor X discover that they're all in Earth orbit. The pair of players soon arrive, and the Grandmaster explains that he's used the combined powers of the Elders to arrange this game for a very special prize. If he wins, then his brother Elder, the Collector, will be returned to life. If he fails, then his own life is forfeit. As for the players, the Earth's people are held in suspension, and only completion of the game will allow them to be released. Also, if he wins, the Grandmaster promises not to use Earthlings as pawns in his games ever again, while the Challenger says she will extend the life of our son by an extra 1,000,000 years, for those of you who eat your veggies. Despite gathering every hero on Earth, they only select 2 teams of 12 and exclude a bunch of them like Immortals and Aliens, so that's kind of a dick move, dragging them up here for no reason. Anyway, they will be competing to find and keep a portion of a sphere. There are 4 of them because naturally we want a way for this whole thing to end in a tie and make it pointless. So issue number 2 brings us the first round, the Frozen Wastes. Talisman, new hero created for the comic, Daredevil and Darkstar will face off against Invisible Woman, Sunfire, and Iron Fist. Yes, Sue Storm, whose titular power is being able to not be seen, is put up against someone whose shtick is he doesn't need to be able to see in order to kick your ass. Naturally, Daredevil wins. Round 2 is Defensor, new hero created for the comic, Captain Britain and She-Hulk versus Iron Man, Arabian Knight, and Sabra. This was just after the cancellation of the Savage She-Hulk in the early days when she was just a more articulate Hulk who wound up in a torn white dress instead of torn purple pants. Well, anyway, it turns out putting a guy named Arabian Knight and a superhero from Israel on the same team was a bad idea. Who knew? Well, despite that, somehow their team manages to pull out victory anyway, leaving the score 1-1 going into the final issue. So we start the next issue with the third round. Le Peregrine, new hero created for the comic, Wolverine and the Thing must defeat Vanguard, Angel, and Black Panther. In this issue, the writer makes 2 extremely ridiculous and completely unlike each other kinds of mistakes. The first one is, I can't even believe I have to say this. Sometimes when the hero is fighting someone else, they'll use a diminutive version of their name to kind of take the piss out of them, as the Brits would say. In one case, for example, the Thing was fighting Black Bolt, and so he called him Blackie for short, to make fun of him, because after all, he's talking to a white king of the Inhumans on the moon. There's really nothing very inappropriate about that. It's not as if he's talking to the Black King of an African nation. Anyway, you won't believe what happens in this issue. Wolverine says that to the Black King of an African nation. Apparently, nobody working on this issue seemed to have noticed that T'Challa, the first black superhero in any mainstream comic book, a pioneer in inclusiveness, has just had a racial slur hurled at him, and in the midst of an international celebration of competition and goodwill. Yeah, that's what's been missing from the Olympics, isn't it? Letting foreigners know they're unwelcome. Now, admittedly, this is then overshadowed by the fact that Wolverine tries to kill him. I mean, I don't want to downplay racism or anything, but if I had to choose between the worst possible insult you could hurl at me or being stabbed, I don't think I'd think much about which my preference would be. Anyway, while alt-right Wolverine is trying to take down Black Panther, Ben Grimm shows up to kindly ask him what the hell is going through his adamantium-fused skull. Anyway, Wolverine's justification for his behavior is that he doesn't play games. If he is in this, he is in it to win it by any means necessary. He's the best there is at what he does, and apparently what he does is commit hate crimes. Anyway, thanks to Ben's distraction, Wolverine does not commit regicide. The Thing gets hold of the piece, and the score is now left 2-1 in favor of the Grand Master. I've been trying to give this series at least a bit more of a, well, straightforward, more documentary style than I normally employ, but it's proving really hard with Contest of Champions. And now we get into the final round, and it's really, well, I'm having a hard time with it. Half of all the participants in this round, and indeed half of all of the new characters introduced, are new characters for here. We have Blitzkrieg from Germany, we have Shamrock from Ireland, and my personal favorite, 5 mutant Chinese brothers who can merge into a single powerful being, Collective Man. Now, to be technical, Collective Man did appear in one panel of The Incredible Hulk, but that was pretty much just to set up the fact that he exists. And he didn't even do anything, so yeah, we can say he was invented for this event. So, Blitzkrieg is teamed up with Captain America and Sasquatch, while Storm is teamed up with the other new people. In the end, Shamrock nabs the prize before Captain America can, at which point the second mistake of the writer comes in. Actually, that might be unfair. It's entirely possible the writer didn't make this mistake. Maybe the editor did, or somebody just dictated it. Regardless, this kind of mistake is not one you can easily overlook, because this mistake is of the most basic type. The score here is quite clearly 2-2. However, they announce the score is 3-1. This is not a minor error. This is going to affect the entire rest of the issue. The fact that it is 3-1 instead of 2-2, which it quite clearly is. It's supposed to be a tie. And what happens in the case of a tie? Is it a dance competition at that point? Who knows? Much easier to just count wrong. Yes. Now, the thing to note is that this inability to count properly causes all the rest of this issue to happen. And the events that happen at the end of the issue continue our domino fall that will lead all the way to the return of Thanos. Indeed, it can be argued that the whole of Infinity Gauntlet only took place because someone at Marvel can't count to 4 without fucking it up. The best I can imagine is that originally it had been intended that this whole event was going to be a case of, well, it ended in a tie, but it's fine because it wasn't about who won. It was all about the fact that we went out there and did our best and had a great time. But instead they added stakes onto this thing, and so now we wind up with this particular situation. In 1982, Marvel is simultaneously launching their line of graphic novels and the first of their miniseries. In the one, they are trusting in the maturity of their audience to follow them through a story that shows a man facing his own mortality and the slow, inevitable death that can come from cancer. In the other, they're desperately hoping the audience doesn't know how to add. As the Grand Master is assembling the segments to then claim his dubiously earned prize, the challenger is revealed to be Death, as in Thanos' would-be girlfriend. Only she could have the power to restore the Collector after being reduced to a pile of ash. But Death reveals that for the sake of balance, only by sacrificing a life of equal power could the Collector be brought back. Well, now we see why all these heroes were brought here, even the ones who couldn't actually compete. Because as an alternative, all of their lives together would be of the same value. but the Grandmaster refuses to betray them, sacrificing himself to bring the Collector back. Aghast at what has happened, he swears he will find a way to compel Death to restore the Grandmaster, promising of a new game, and all the heroes are sent back. What's disappointing about Contest of Champions is the squandering of the premise by bringing in characters we have never heard of and aren't interested in the slightest. It was sort of a Secret Wars before Secret Wars, and the conflicts between characters like Daredevil and Iron Fist showed the potential of the premise, and also showed why it was being wasted here. Anyway, the Collector didn't crop up again for some time, save for a one-off appearance in Marvel Team-Up Annual number 7, where he, and this is really becoming the I Kid You Not episode, isn't it? Where he captures the target of his collecting mania by wishing for it using Aladdin's magic lamp. This has nothing to do with the Grandmaster. He's concerned about some demonic thing that was showing up in Thor at the time, and I guess his magic lamp wasn't going to be able to defeat it either. Anyway, it's not important for our purposes, so let's move on. Despite happening in 1982, nothing would come of the Collector and the Grandmaster's plot for many years to come, until we finally get to Marvel's sole cosmic book at the time, The Silver Surfer. What was funny about it was that it wasn't even going to be a cosmic book. See, while many of the characters that went on to greatness were mentioned with their connection to Stan Lee, well, the one that Stan was actually really protective of was the Silver Surfer. As I mentioned over in Incredible, Surfer wasn't originally going to be allowed to be in the Defenders. His appearance with Namor and the Hulk was just supposed to be an isolated case as far as Stan was concerned. But Steve Englehart, when he took over Defenders, asked Stan if he would reconsider. And Stan did. But Defenders was by and large supposed to be the exception. Stan wanted that character to be his and his alone. After Stan wrote Fantastic Four 123 in 1972, the character was almost entirely limited to the Defenders and its crossovers. He would appear in background cameos with a number of other characters, sure, but that was it as far as what Stan wanted done. He did 2 one-offs of the character in the early 80s, Marvel's Epic Illustrated and a one-shot with John Byrne. The limited other appearances of the character, though, a trio of Fantastic Four issues in 1975 and again in 1983, an appearance over in the Incredible Hulk 250, accurately described as Silver Surfer is like a douchebag with a yacht appearing on Gilligan's Island, and then a pair of Avengers books by Jim Shooter, and inexplicably, Tomb of Dracula number 50. This represented virtually all of the Surfer's non-cameo, non-Defenders appearances for a period of 15 years. I'm not counting Secret Wars 2 because honestly, I've said enough about Secret Wars 2 already. Anyway, we reached 1985, and Steve Englehart, who brought the Surfer back to the Defenders, remember, is back at Marvel starting a new book called The West Coast Avengers. No relation to the recent series with Gwenpool. Roger Stern's splitting of the team to have the regular Avengers in New York and another team of them on the West Coast had run through a few Avengers-related books and its own miniseries, but now Steve Englehart was going to write the series proper, plus some books related to Vision and the Scarlet Witch. Well, this was going really well, and after a little while, Jim Shooter, editor-in-chief at Marvel at the time, contacted him to ask if Englehart would be willing to write a book dedicated to the Silver Surfer. After all, next to Stan, Englehart probably had the most experience when doing the character, or at least doing the character right. Englehart asked about Stan, and Shooter said something to the effect of, "You let me worry about Stan." Marvel's position was essentially, they owned this character, but they weren't doing anything with him. Enough was enough, and it was time to see what this unique character could do. Englehart said, "Okay, but I want to do the unthinkable. I want to end the Surfer's exile to Earth." The Silver Surfer is a cosmic character, he argued. They'd confined him to Earth for 20 years. It's been played out. It was time to return him to space and let him get involved in the neglected cosmic aspect of the Marvel Universe. Well, naturally, they said no. But then after finishing the first issue, they realized Engelhart had the right idea and told him he could actually scrap the entire story he did and do it over again if he liked, which he did. Engelhart's 31-issue run was notable for the Kree-Skrull War restarting, resolving the Skrull genetics bomb we talked about last time, the return of the Super Skrull, who actually played a part in that resolution, and a lot of Galactus. Before the Silver Surfer series, Galactus had only about 50 appearances since his creation in 1966, and about 20% of those were his presence during the original Secret Wars. Now Galactus was a recurring figure, and not just in the parts we'll be covering, and Engelhart showed that it fit so well that Galactus was a regular presence in the book for the next 10 years. A lot happens, so rather than covering every issue, I'm really only going to focus upon that related to the secondary plot line of the book with the Elders. So, let's start with Silver Surfer number 1. The issue begins with the Surfer at the South Pole trying to breach the barrier that keeps him on Earth, and in so doing has burnt a hole in the ozone layer to allow him to get the full power of the sun. When the Fantastic Four show up and tell him, we need that, he feels kind of bad and quickly gets karmic payback as someone arrives to beat the crap out of him. That someone is the Champion, one of the Elders, who previously was only seen in Marvel 2-in-1 Annual number 7. The Champion wanted to face off against all the strongest heroes on Earth in a boxing ring, and it was Ben Grimm's refusal to be beaten that convinced the Champion to spare our world. Now he's back kicking the stuffing out of the Silver Surfer, except things are a little different in this fight. See, several heroes were disqualified in that issue because they weren't fighting by the rules. Hulk, for instance, didn't want to box. He wanted to kick the living shit out of this guy, and so was disqualified. Well, this is a brawl here. So rather than some Marcus of Queensberry shtick, Surfer fully unloads on this guy with everything he's got and defeats him. The Champion is here because he wanted to ensure the Surfer couldn't interfere with the Skrull plan regarding Galactus. With the genetics bomb we talked about in our last part taking away their shape-changing ability, a faction of Skrulls has kidnapped Nova and is holding her hostage so that they can compel Galactus to destroy the Kree before the Kree learn what's happened and come and attack them while they're so vulnerable. The Champion came because Silver Surfer could leave, but he won't say how. It's Ben Grimm who suggests just flying him up in a rocket rather than trying to pass through on his board, which works, freeing the Surfer from his imprisonment on Earth. He has defied Galactus, and now the first thing he's going to do is go and find Galactus. Actually, there's a very good reason for that. He knows that so long as Galactus is against him, he could wind up being imprisoned again. So he needs to square things with the Big G first, and freeing Nova might be the key to that. Galactus agrees. He's not really built for rescuing someone surrounded by hostiles. It'd be like performing brain surgery while wearing boxing gloves. So with that, the Surfer frees Nova, Galactus frees him, and he goes on to see to some personal stuff until we get back to the Elders. But not in Silver Surfer, with the Avengers. In West Coast Avengers Annual number 2, the two teams are playing baseball. In costumes, because they're superheroes, it's what they do. The Silver Surfer breaks through the dome of the stadium to say that he overheard a plan of the Elders to kill them. And sure enough, the East Coast Avengers team are revealed to have dropped dead. The Surfer explains that while they know about the Collector, the Gardener, and the Possessor, a rather small-time Elder who had mixed it up with Thor twice and the Champions once, the one that they're facing is the Grandmaster, even though he's dead. Seems the Grandmaster not only anticipated Death's trickery in the Contest of Champions, but was counting on it. He is now conducting his game from her domain. The Collector recognizes that as representatives of Earth's heroes, the surviving West Coast Avengers are to thank for his life and wants to help them. So, he explains that, and he is truly appalled, he insists, that the lives of the others were taken to earn the Grandmaster's own freedom. The only way to save them is for the rest of the heroes, including Silver Surfer, to go into Death's domain, which can only be entered by dying. He provides a rare venom, and after discussing it, they agree to use it with the understanding that they'll all get to come back once they've rescued the Avengers from the Grandmaster's plan. Meanwhile, in Death's domain, the Grandmaster tells the East Coast Avengers, hey, sorry for the bad news, but you're caught up in a plan by the Collector because that rat bastard has made a deal to trade the lives of the West Coast Avengers to Death in exchange for a vow that he will never die again. The only possible hope for saving all of them, he insists, is for the East Coast Avengers to subdue the West Coast Avengers before Death herself arrives so that he can get them all out of here and back to the world of the living. So the teams fight while Surfer heads off to plead with Death herself that this entire affair is beneath her and just send them all back. But when she comes to sort this mess out, she steps right into the Grandmaster's trap and is incapacitated, while he gains her power. In Avengers Annual number 16, the Grandmaster reveals his plot to start a new Big Bang thanks to 5 bombs that he's made and placed around the universe. The combined Avengers teams can try to stop them, but they'll be opposed by the Legion of the Unliving, composed of those like the Swordsman and Captain Marvel and Drax the Destroyer, those we knew fought at their side and died. This is very likely just a deception, though, for 2 reasons. First, there's no real sign these people are acting like themselves during all of this. And second of all, several of them, including Bucky and Norman Osborn, are not actually dead. This isn't the first iteration of the Legion of the Unliving, by the way. But anyway, things are rough. Korvac is part of the Legion team, and that guy's defeat wasn't without the killing of most of the Avengers. He healed them before he perished because, well, it's complicated. He and Surfer wind up in a draw as he melts all the metal off the Surfer's body with his powers. But the Surfer steers them into one of the bombs, taking out it and them both at once. Likewise, the others die saving the universe. Well, most of it, save for Captain America and Hawkeye. But the Grandmaster wants this, so he declares, Round 1 is now over. And then begins round 2, adding all of the heroes who just died in round 1 to his Legion. Knowing they're screwed, Hawkeye tempts the Grandmaster with a game of chance instead, which he rigs, and during his distraction, Death is freed and puts things back to rights, and exiles the Grandmaster from her realm forever, which brings us over to Silver Surfer number 3. During the time that the Grandmaster was in control, he sent the Collector's wife back to him, who had died of ennui billions of years ago. Elders lived so long without giving in to that by gaining an obsession to keep them occupied. She lacks that, though, and so moments after returning, despite his pleas, she again gives in to it and perishes. Then the pissed-off Silver Surfer shows up. The Collector says he only did what he did to repay his debt to the Grandmaster for restoring him back to life. But after the Surfer leaves to return the one Avenger who didn't actually die back to Earth, he warns the other Elders. So not long after, the Surfer has a run-in with another Elder, one we've seen only once before in the pages of the Defenders, the Runner, who overpowers the Surfer and crashes his board into a planet. But he's saved by the return of another of Englehart's creations, Mantis. In issue number 4, we learn that Mantis and the Kotati are the reason that the Surfer knew of the threat to the Avengers. He'd been lying in some comfy foliage, so they used that to put the images into his head. They're concerned about the Elders plotting, and so Mantis joins the Silver Surfer to head to where the Elders meet. Grandmaster, Gardener, Collector, Runner, Champion, Possessor, and Contemplator, plus 3 more that we haven't met yet. The Obliterator, the Traitor, and the Astronomer. That last one was important because it was he who worked out with the Grandmaster his strategy of dying, heading to Death's realm, making a pig's breakfast of the whole thing, and in so doing, have the Elders forever barred from her domain, ensuring they are now truly immortal. All 11 of them. 11? Oh yes, the 11th is the world they are standing on. It's Ego, the living planet. Ego wasn't well known back then. In fact, he was mostly a Thor villain, believe it or not, having one skirmish with the Fantastic Four, and another with Rom the Space Knight of all people. The Surfer and Mantis escape, pursued in issue number 5 by the Obliterator, only for the Surfer to find a clever way to defeat a man who won't stop fighting and can't be killed. He turns the guy's guns into flashlights using his Power Cosmic's ability to transmute things, and so renders his transport useless and his ability to kill people useless. The guy's stuck here and can't shoot anybody, which is his entire purpose for being. Remember how all elders have an obsession? Well, his is a killing. So he wants to drop dead, only he can't, because elders can no longer die. Oops. In issue number 6, the Obliterator bitterly explains the plan. The elders are severely annoyed by the existence of Galactus, a being older than themselves, and they want to kill him. They know that to do so would destroy the universe, as he prevents that static state that would exist if death and eternity found balance, remember? But that's fine with them. Since they can no longer die, they would then pass into the next reality to emerge the same way Galactus passed from the last reality into ours. He also says that they're going to meet on Earth next, since Galactus swore never to destroy that world after recruiting Nova as his herald. The Surfer can't go right now. The Kree have learned of the loss of the Skrull's shape-changing abilities and started a new Kree-Skrull war in the hopes of easily mopping them up, and the Surfer's homeworld of Zen-La is being pulled into that mess. But Mantis emerges on Earth, don't ask, to hear how they plan to destroy Galactus. And I'm sure by now you're wondering what this convoluted trip we've had so far has to do with our journey to Infinity Gauntlet. Well, if you have been wondering, I'm finally ready to give you the answer. Because the means to destroy Galactus, the Gardener says, will be found by gaining the 6 soul gems once collected by Thanos. The Gardener claimed the first of them from the grave of Adam Warlock, where Captain Marvel had left it. The other 5 were scattered in the explosion and went into hyperspace. The Collector managed to pick up one of them, the Champion won another in a competition, and the Trader traded for 2 of them. That leaves just one more gem, and the Contemplator is working to get that one, but it also involves the Kree-Skrull War. There's racial conflict among the Kree between the blue and the pink, and this is so ingrained that even in the collective minds of the Kree that make up the Supreme Intelligence, there is disharmony. The Soul Gem, however, has the power to keep it under control. Most likely this is the Mind Gem, since it absorbs the Surfer into the Supreme Intelligence zeitgeist. But the Surfer eventually escapes, taking the gem with him, and leaving the Supreme Intelligence a gibbering idiot. Issue number 9 begins with the Elders having prepared to get the gem. They had captured Mantis when she was spying on them on Earth, and the Gardener captured Shalabal, the Surfer's lover when he was Norin Rod, at the end of that issue. The Surfer is in love with both of them, so naturally he'll be prepared to trade anything in order to have them back. He does, but the Grandmaster's a dick, and so tosses the women at the Star. The Surfer is only able to save Shalabal, and he is peeved. But in the meantime, Galactus has been lured to where the Elders want him, and they unleash the power of the Soul Gems on him, redirecting his energy to bring life to dead planets. An ironic end. But the Surfer, in his rage, gets in the way of their plan, causing the Star to turn into a black hole. The gems and 3 of the Elders, the Trader, the Astronomer, and the Possessor, all fall into the black hole. Galactus stabilizes his power finally and stops the rest of them, including the Surfer and Nova, from falling in, which leads us to issue 10. Galactus decides the best way to deal with these Elders, who can't die, is to just eat them. When all you have is a fork, everything looks like dinner. Galactus doesn't care about the Obliterator since he wasn't part of the attack on his person, but the Contemplator was present in astral form. So he sends Nova off to go and deal with him, and asks the Surfer to help her. But before they go, they spot Galactus and Eternity having a conversation, similar to the one between Galactus and Death right before he ate the Skrull throne world, where Eternity explains that he tried to thwart this by using the Surfer, but oops, there were complications. Still, bygones and all that. Except afterwards, Death notes that Galactus may be a necessary disruptor, but she is not one to be ignored. What's that mean? We'll get to that in a moment. First, along the way, as the Surfer and Nova are running the errand for Galactus, they get attacked by a doppelganger of the Silver Surfer. Not in the way that will happen in Infinity War, just a regular doppelganger. See, remember in the death of Captain Marvel, I pointed out to you the presence of the Silver Surfer there? Well, it should have been impossible for him to be on Titan. And that's because he wasn't. That was a Skrull. And when the genetics bomb went off, that Skrull, who took a shine to that form, got stuck as the Silver Surfer. There's Tech to explain why he's able to mimic the power cosmic too. But anyway, that little plot hole has been glossed over, and the duplicate one then gets killed by Ronan the Accuser, who thinks he's the real Surfer, although he was killing him for the Skrull Surfer's crime, so it is completely warranted. The story actually continues in Silver Surfer Annual number 1, the third issue in a massive summer storyline that ran through all of the Marvel annuals called The Evolutionary War, on account of it was about the High Evolutionary. However, while that story with the Super Skrulls return will matter for the Kree-Skrull War, it doesn't for our purposes. Rather, it's the B story that does. Which is funny because it's part of the issue that Marvel Unlimited does not include. I had to go find the missing pages somewhere else. As you can see, Galactus is not doing well. That's what happens when your food disagrees with you. He tells Nova that he needs the Silver Surfer and Sue Richards. Oh, and Reed too. But Sue is actually the most important. So she sends a message to Surfer, who puts aside dealing with the High Evolutionary so he can sort out his boss's indigestion, leading us to issue 15. He quickly convinces Sue and Reed to help out, and they bring Franklin along because that's the FF for you. Galactus says the answer to this is in the Soul Gems, specifically the one that steals souls, but they won't be able to tell which is which, so they'll need to bring all of them. Death will no longer claim the souls of the Elders, which is why they're still alive inside of his body, killing him from within. But if he uses the Soul Gem like the way Warlock used to, he could suck out their souls, then their bodies would be rendered harmless. He needs Surfer to guide them through the black hole, Reed to pilot the ship, and Sue to use her force fields to handle the gems safely, or else they might lose their souls in the process. Surfer leads them to the Possessor, who has since become storyteller to a bunch of angry aliens, and he points them to the Traitor and the Astronomer, who have already recovered all 6 gems. But things have gotten out of hand. Sue has been getting weirder and weirder since entering this place. Seems that this is drawing out the persona of malice that had emerged inside of her thanks to the hate monger a few years earlier. So she knocks out Reed and Surfer while negotiating for the gems. Issue 16 sees her trying to use the gems to fly back, but after some verbal browbeating by Reed, the Traitor and Astronomer allow Surfer and Reed to pursue, unaware that it's actually all part of their plan. The pair get back on the ship and Reed fights Sue, with him having grown more her opposite the whole time. Cold logic, that's all he seems to know. During the fight, the Soul Gem, Warlock's, is drawn to Reed's forehead and takes him over, drawing in Sue's soul as well. Except all of this has been a trick. The force of the opposing souls is enough to then free the real culprit here, the In-Betweener. Remember him? After his appearance in Warlock's book, he was involved in the conclusion of a Doctor Strange plotline, thwarted by calling on the combined power of order and chaos that had spawned him. That would be consistent with this, which seems to disregard a one-off appearance in Rom the Space Knight, which I can accept, and involvement in Secret Wars 2, which I definitely can accept. The plot of the 3 Elders was that they would restore the In-Betweener, in return for which he would bring them back to their universe and destroy Galactus for them. Which he tries to do, but the In-Betweener's power is summoning an opposing force to destroy. And since Galactus has no opposing force, he's beyond the In-Betweener's power. So he's going to toss Galactus into the black hole instead. The others don't like the idea since their brother Elders are still inside of Galactus. So the In-Betweener, annoyed with them, decides that he's going to destroy them despite the fact that they can't die. He summons their opposing force, death itself. And because he has called her forth, she can't resist his compulsion to destroy them. This will come up in the future. For now, the ship falls into the black hole, but Lord Chaos and Master Order agree with the Surfer to correct the problem with Galactus, compelling the elders inside of him to escape from his body. Then they push the ship back out again. He's better now, leading us into our final issue for this part, issue number 18. Well, with having yet another person try to kill him, Galactus is rather pissed off, and he plans to kill the In-Betweener over it. Meanwhile, to make sure the elders don't fall back into their realm, Chaos and Order gave each of the surviving elders one of the soul gems. The sixth one is still with the In-Betweener, remember. The gems are thus in the possession of the Champion, the Gardener, the Collector, the Runner, the Grandmaster, and again, Warlock's soul gem is on the brow of the In-Betweener. However, knowing that the In-Betweener killed 3 of their number, the other elders are compelled to oppose him out of self-preservation. So using the soul gems combined with the Surfer's power cosmic, they force the fighting pair into the other universe where Chaos and Order can deal with the In-Betweener for good this time. And knowing the better part of valor, the elders quickly haul ass, taking the 5 soul gems with them. If you're wondering what became of the rest of the elders, in a one-off filler book, the Obliterator finally rebuilt his weapons and attacked Zen-La, intent on killing until he drew in the Silver Surfer to get revenge. It led to the realization that he wasn't going to win, and when he threatened to hurt the Surfer by wiping out his people, the Surfer argued that doing so would make him the last survivor of his race, and thus an elder, and if elders can't die, the Obliterator could never kill him, QED. So in the face of this nonsense, the Obliterator changed his mind and basically slid into obscurity. The Contemplator, that was a different story. He was mostly devoured by a space pirate named Reptile, but since he couldn't die, instead manipulated events in the Kree-Skrull War until in the end his plans fell apart, and the ruler of the Kree was an alien nobody with the appropriate name of Clumsy Foul-Up. And we get a chance to see the Silver Surfer's O-face. Englehart had wound things down because he didn't want to leave his successor tied to do anything with the character. He wanted to allow them a clean break. Which is good because after 2 fill-in issues by future Image Comics president Jim Valentino, the book was taken over by Jim Starlin with issue 34. And with that, Thanos was back, and the march towards the Infinity Gauntlet was now underway. Next time, Thanos Ascendant.